Good afternoon. I've got that difficult slot, haven't I, just after lunch. Somebody said earlier on, didn't they, that it's quite a grand place to be. The last time I spoke for the PWI, I was down at Great George Street in London, which was also a great privilege. It's a privilege to have been asked to come back and speak to you all again. This time I'm going to talk to you about how we deal with the problems of affordability in the highway environment. So, in doing that, I'm going to look a little bit about how there are similarities between what we do in highways and Network Rail, the issues we have from a public funding point of view, how we use the asset management approach, some of that was touched on earlier by James, look at how we make affordable renewals, and then look a little bit about how some example projects of things that we've done that help make that more affordable. So some of that is grouping different types of work together. Some of that is working in collaborative ways, working with our supply chain, early contractor involvement. The balance that we have between reactive, proactive planning. I mentioned before the question about TOTEX, so there's some of that that crops up in my slide pack as well. So, myself, I'm Head of Planning and Development in the Midlands region, so I'll explain a little bit later on how we are set up also in national highways with different regions, very, very similar to Network Rail. So, national highways, it's quite interesting because I've spoken to a few people and people still refer to us as the Highways Agency or Highways England. We are national highways. So Highways Agency was before the Act of Parliament in 2015. So on the 1st of April 2015, we became a Strategic Highways Authority. We changed names at one point since then. So it became Highways England and then became what we are now, National Highways. We look after the trunk roads and the motorways across England, but not Scotland. So there's one slight difference to ourselves and Network Rail. But we're charged with looking after that strategic road network. We have 7 individual regions. I myself work in the Midlands region, which stretches all the way from Lincolnshire all the way to the Welsh border, and from almost Sheffield down to Gloucester area. So we're split up into big regions. And we operate that through a range of people. So historically we were set up using the supply chain, did all of the work for us. And a lot of people over the last 10 years have been tupied into National Highways, bringing the expertise in-house. We still use our supply chain for design and construction and maintenance work, but a lot of the expertise is now sitting directly within National Highways. I will go back. I missed a part out, the bottom part on there about investment periods. We are very similar to Network Rail and other bodies that we run in investment periods. So our last investment period actually ended in the beginning of this year, so at the end of March. That was what was known as RIS2. We spent £23 billion over that 5-year period. We are now in what we call an interim year because our next RIS period was postponed because of a slight change in government. The next roads investment strategy period will start on the 1st of April next year. So, our road network. So, we, like Network Rail, we provide an essential service. So 9 out of 10 journeys in the UK is done on the road network. 8 out of 10 freight journeys is done on the road network. So we are a fundamental part of what the nation needs. And our customers tell us about our assets all the time. We do a lot of what we do is moving towards a customer service organisation. A little bit earlier on we were talking about asset management planning and about what your strategic viewpoint is. Well, when we were Highways Agency, we were a road builder. We are no longer a road builder. We're moving towards a customer service organisation. And what do they want? They want us to improve road safety. They want a reliable network. They want good ride quality. They want to help us transition people to electric vehicles. Other stakeholders tell us we need to concentrate more on the environment and that we need to make improvements in active travel so that people can use other forms of transport, including linking with railway network. So there's nothing unusual or surprising in there. Again, very great similarities with yourselves in the rail industry. We have a huge network. So there's over 4,300 miles of road that we look after, 24,000 bridges. There are, once I took on the role of Head of Planning and Development, and I had the environmental teams in there, the amount of soft estate that we look after is immense. And I don't think people necessarily appreciate that it isn't just the road that we drive on or the rail that we travel on. It's actually all the surrounding infrastructure, which also includes all of the drainage that we've got, 43,000 linear kilometres of that. And whilst we don't necessarily think of technology and electrical equipment in relation to roads, we've got over 43,000 items, which include all the message signs that you see on the roadside, all our telephone network that we have on the motorway network, traffic signals as well. And all of that we've got to look after. So the challenges. The challenges that I show on here, I think were shown on some of the slides previously, and there's nothing, again, any different here between us in highways and rail industry. We have an aging infrastructure. So you might think that because we look after the motorway network, it's relatively new. We have a challenge that a lot of that was built in the 60s and 70s, and they used very similar construction techniques. And at that time, there were techniques that were used that are now not standing the test of time particularly well. Our trunk road network is different again. So some of this has been built up over long periods of time, and you can trace parts of our network, the A5 for example, back to Roman times. So we've probably got newer infrastructure than you, but we've also got some that the Romans built. That in itself brings a whole set of challenges. We also have frontages onto all of that network. So people live on it directly, which provides its own set of challenges. We've got to maintain safety. Every day, everybody travels on the road network. We need to maintain that safety. We've got increasing demand. So whilst it tailed off as we went into COVID, we are now back above the traffic volumes that we had pre-COVID days. So we have to cope with that increasing volume, and it's increasing throughout the day. We used to do a lot of work at night, but even at night, it's increasing. Changing climate, that's not yet been mentioned today. It's becoming an increasing problem, not just from thinking about what we do to minimize the impact, but also what it is that we do to counter for it. So increased size of drainage. Does the increased temperature, bridges expand and contract? We don't have the rail problem that you have of expansion and contraction, but we do have a problem with our bridges and parapets and things. So we've got to consider those as well. And also pollution, something that we're taking a lot more interest in because members of the public are interested in that, particularly around water quality. So, addressing some of those challenges. So, thinking back earlier on, there was an asset management plan. It was interesting because it had lots of boxes across the bottom, and I was thinking to my side here that it got similar boxes that run across, and our strategy, running through from a strategy, all the different steps that we undertake, making sure that we've got clear objectives set out at the start. So, I said we're moving to be more of a customer service organisation, looking at the service that the road provides, not just actually it's a road and it's an asset. What is it that we've got to provide from that point of view? That we coordinate activities together. We've got to realise the value from the assets that we've got, make them last longer. People have mentioned about whole life cost. So how do we work that through, but at the same time maintain the safety of it and make sure that that's set out in a strategy? And then we have to build all that theory into what we put into the roads investment periods. That's where I think you've got to draw that line of sight, because you've got to have all of that plan in place in order to get the right money in the right places at the right time. That's the first bit before you can then actually start delivering things to make things more affordable. So building that RIS case. So I was quite extensively involved in what's being put together for RIS 3, which admittedly is a year delayed. And one of the things that we've spent a lot of time doing is in changing our approach and demonstrating that. So politicians like to see the next new shiny thing. They like a nice new shiny bit of road because they can go along and then go and open it and cut the ribbon and everybody's happy. It's not that exciting maintaining what you've already got. So we've done an awful lot of work in the build-up to RIS 3. We've worked very closely with ORR and DFT in helping Treasury understand the importance of maintenance. And we've built a case by having that strategy and approach set out, that we make sure we do the right modelling in place, that then we apply a dose of reality to that and think about how it's actually going to be delivered and where the risks are. And then use that to then lobby for money, for maintenance. And RIS 3 is looking like we are going to get more now for maintenance, less for new build. So that's great for people like me who are looking after what we've got. So a little bit more about how we've done that. So we did modelling exercises across most of our asset classes to understand how they're deteriorating, to help understand theoretically this is the amount of money that we need. We used some scary pictures and stories, particularly in structures, to tell people this is what's going to happen if you don't invest in the network that we've already got. There's that thorny bit about OPEX and CAPEX, very, very difficult. We have very clear set out strategies and plans for our maintenance. And we've now, because we've got better information on our asset quantities and data, we're now better able to demonstrate what we need to maintain those. So we've used that to help the OPEX case, and the CAPEX case, we've built the models up so that we can demonstrate how much we need there. Then we've applied reality. I think it was mentioned earlier on about making sure that the supply chain, they're not like a tap, you can't turn them on and off. And we know that. A lot of us in National Highways came from the supply chain, and you can't turn us on and off. It doesn't work. So it's all well and good saying we want a lot more money, but actually it needs to be consistently driven over a longer period of time. And don't go and ask for more money and structures, and then actually we can't go and deliver it all. It needs to be a very careful balance in that reality space. So can you access the network? How do you join the dots between the different asset classes? And all of that is built off the back of having the right policy in place. So having the right asset management strategy and plans, everything overarching. And that loop, that was mentioned very early on. It's actually all about the whole thing has to tie together, and you've got to keep reviewing the thing. So that's how we've built up the risk case to help us get the right money. So we're looking at RIS 3. We're looking at circa £25 billion for that period of time. I mentioned it starts in April next year. We're currently in the process of developing our draft strategic business plan, and that's going to set out how we're going to deliver it. We have different asset classes that have got specific funding attached to it. We also have targets in terms of the efficiencies for different classes. So how much we spend per kilometre on pavements and how much we spend per structure. That's quite tricky because this presents us challenges. It's based on our modelling, but we've got to face up to those and work to them. And that will all start getting delivered. But of course, we're already working on that, it's not a case of turn the tap on the 1st of April next year. Most of all of this is already in flight in the development of the programs. So how are we doing that? Again, the similarities in here about project scope. One of my bugbears is this, that we don't get project scope particularly well done, and National Highways is no exception. We need to make sure that we've got all of the right asset needs. For that, you need to have good quality inspections, you need to have good quality data, then you need to prioritize that. We are in the process of trying to get consistency around the whole country. That is really hard. But until we really do that, then it's very difficult to balance everything in the right places. We're using models to predict things now. So we are developing things, simple things like road markings. We know how quickly they deteriorate. So we can set out asset management plans and have a plan for exactly when we want to go and intervene at the right time. We could do something similar for pavement, for the surfacing material, the blacktop that we have. But then we need to build all of that into the scope of projects and make sure that we've got the right needs in there, that we do multiple different assets together, so where the drainage is affecting structures or the pavement or the geotechnics, that we do that at the same time. Do we need to do the soft estate at the same time? So making sure that we join all of those things together. But all of that comes up front, making sure we really understand what our problems are and what our scope is. Then comes a really tricky bit. I don't do this. We have teams of people who work at program planning. And this, I think, is a dark art. I really do, because they've got to try and balance all of those needs with the priorities that engineers and asset managers have set out, balancing those with where you can access the network. I draw the diagram, the little map up at that top corner. That shows some of our routes, and they're in a triangle. And if you work on one of those routes, the diversion route is around the other two routes. It goes into Wales as well, so we've got to liaise with Welsh authorities. And you can't work on the two routes at the same time. I'm sure you have similar problems, but you've got to work that through. And then the assets, their needs are at different times. So do you bring things forward? Do you delay them? Do you do something interim to reduce the level of risk now and then come and do? So there's a lot of pieces of jigsaw puzzle to that to work through in the program. And then they've got to balance that with budgets, and also then to start looking, and then what is the customer impact. Then we bring in safety as well, making sure that we've thought about that, not just to making improvements to our road users, but also to the road workers that we've got. So is it safer to close a road, or can we do things with the road open with lane closures? Do we do it at night? Can we do things in the daytime? Lots of different parts of that challenge to work through. Then we need to think about what the types of solution are. So in some of the examples I'm going to come to, you'll see that sometimes we can use different approaches to delivering things, which gives us efficiencies. And then also then thinking about cyclical maintenance. So one of the ways that I mentioned before about the TOTEX and CAPEX thing. So is it a cyclical maintenance activity, or is it something that is now renewing the asset? And where does that blurry line come? So some examples of what we have done. So this is in Nottingham on the A52. This is a scheme that's currently on the ground. If anybody lives in Nottingham, it's on the western side of the city, on the approach into the city centre, where the trunk road narrows down to a single carriageway as it approaches the city centre. And in that location, we had got a number of issues around the drainage being defective, the road pavement, street lighting. We'd also got a need to sort out and make improvements from walking and cycling. We needed to upgrade a pedestrian crossing. These were all originally sat as individual needs, all separate, all with different timescales of when they needed to be done. but we've grouped them all together into one project. It's not been without its challenges to get that built together as one scheme. To develop that in such a way that we can deliver it, we need to have the carriageway closed and a diversion route on. We had to wait until utilities have been in there and diverted services. But that project is underway. It is actually now running slightly ahead of programme. Whether it will come in under or over or exactly on budget, we will have to wait and see on that. What is interesting, and you don't have this challenge, I don't think, but utilities are a problem. Since we've started working there, Severn Trent Water have come along and actually said, oh, by the way, we want to renew all the water mains through there. We were going to do it in a few years' time. Do you think you can facilitate us doing that? So we're currently working with them to see if that can now be facilitated, because that's better for customers. We'll have to think about how that impacts on our programme and our costs, but maybe there's some betterment and efficiencies that can be had there. Efficiencies through different approaches. So I picked up an example here for the A49. So we did a whole load of different route treatments on the A49 through Shropshire and Herefordshire. Some of this included wholesale renewal of the pavement, so complete renewal of the assets, and some of it has been life enhancing. So we do a treatment which is known as retexturing, and the machine that's shown top left there, basically it scrubs the surface of the tarmac. That's what it does, and it increases the texture. So it improves safety because it's to do with the skidding resistance on the carriageway. The alternative to doing that is we have to go and resurface it, but the surfacing has still got life left in it. So doing that gives us a little bit of extra life. We do use, and we haven't done for some time, but going back and thinking about what local authorities do, they use surface dressing. People have seen this that local authorities use all the time. It extends the life. It's less effective on the trunk road network where we have lots of heavy traffic, but on some of our lighter used routes like the A49, it might be something that's suitable. So we think about things like that. We also think about how we deliver these things. So I mentioned before about diversion routes and the length. Once we start getting out to Shropshire and Herefordshire and these parts of the diversion routes that we've got available to us are not that good. So it causes significant disruption to the communities there. So once we've got something shut, what else can we do in there to extend the life of other assets so we don't have to come back? And then thinking about how do we do that as individual parts, because we don't want to shut all of it. ECI, so involving the contractors in working on that. And we used, in this particular case, we were originally going to shut it, but we also looked at, they came forward and said, well, why can't we use convoy working? And that's when you actually close the road, but actually have vehicles to actually guide the traffic through the works. So we used ECI to help us reducing the costs. Another one, again, with contractors using collaboration. So this was a scheme on the A43, a geotechnical scheme. And with this one, we actually made use of high-speed 2's closures. So they were closing the A43 to undertake part of their work. So in doing that, we saved £500,000 off this project, and we actually brought it in quicker. So that was by working with other parties, not just ourselves. And then the right maintenance. One of my things about here is the drainage, top left there. So is that cyclical maintenance through OPEX because you're clearing out the drain, the ditch? Or do you wait until it's reached the point where you need to renew it and then it becomes a capital expenditure? Which is the best from a whole life costing point of view? Which is the most efficient? How do we get the most out of it? Then also working on making sure that when we close the roads, that we do multiple works, that we do the cyclical work alongside doing our capital renewals. Also thinking about we now have a full plan. Cyclical runs every year, so why do we not have that as a plan that we run all of the time? And then also testing to get extra life out of things. So the lighting columns that are shown in the bottom middle picture there, so they were at the end of their theoretical life from a fatigue point of view. We took one down, we took it away, we tested it, and we've demonstrated that it's actually perfectly all right, and it's got more life. So we've actually kept the assets and given them longer life through testing. So to close that off, I hope that gives you a feeling that actually the highways maintenance is very, very similar to the railway industry. We have a lot of the similar problems, that we're using asset management planning, as was brought up earlier on, to actually help us plan, to actually get the right money for the right things in the right places. But it remains a challenge balancing all of those different aspects to get the affordability out of what we do. Okay, thank you very much.